Hello and welcome to this first tutorial on rotoscoping with Mocha for After Effects. Just occasionally somebody gets a shot that they need to use because the interview is perfect, but the whole thing's been set up incorrectly and needs to be rotoscoped out. And this is a perfect example of that. The guy gave a brilliant interview. He wasn't to know that the background was lit completely incorrectly, and you can see all these crinkles and creases in the background. So what we need to do is separate the man from his background and give him a completely new background, which is just another layer of some sort. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you could start to do it in After Effects, but it's probably far quicker and simpler to do quite a lot of the work in Mocha. However, there is still quite a bit of work that you can do in After Effects. But the first thing you must do is look at the footage and make some decisions. Now, in a previous tutorial I looked at these tulips and showed how to draw, how to create masks in After Effects, and I've got that actually just here, and we've drawn around and we've actually added different colours into the holes that were actually in the original. Now I'm going to take the masks that I created and I'm going to put them on the layer in After Effects. So I'm going to choose all these masks, so vars, then hold the shift key down to mask 4, Control or Command C to copy them, and go across to my new composition, select the layer, Control or Command V to paste, and there they all are. And I'm going to select the layer and hit M for mask and reveal the masks, select the vase mask path, and then just marquee select these bottom 2 points, and actually I'm just going to pull them down to reveal the whole of the vase. Okay, so I've drawn masks in this case in After Effects to be able to cut out the bits and pieces that needed to be cut out. I'm just going to drag another copy of the footage underneath that just to explain what I'm doing. I'm using After Effects to mask out the areas that are not moving. So areas that don't need to be tracked are stable but still need to be masked out. So for instance, these holes between the tulips, and if I needed to use these candles, the holes inside these candles, and around these candles that aren't actually moving, are staying still, I can actually use After Effects to create masks. Now I could create shapes in Mocha, however shapes are effects, and effects will render more slowly and be heavier on your machine than masks. So the first thing you need to ask yourself overall is, do we need any of this? Do we actually need this bit over here? Do we need these candles over here? Can I just mask the man out and give him a new background? Because it's a pain in the neck, and as you can see, we can even see the cameraman reflected here in this vase. So do I need these at all? And if you do need them, do they need to be tracked, or can you draw just masks? And if you can draw just masks, draw those masks in After Effects. Don't draw them in Mocha and then ship them across as effects, because that will slow down your machine and can cause you problems. I say this from experience. So when you can, do masking in After Effects, but when you have got tracking to do, go over to Mocha and do it there. So as you can see, our top layer would have been all our masks, all the ones that we chose to use. But ideally for this man, what you actually want to do is cut him out completely from the background and just give him a completely new background without the vase, without the candles, just so that we can watch him and concentrate on him and not be distracted. Okay, so let's go to Mocha. Now I've actually got Mocha Pro and Mocha for After Effects on this machine, and the differences are actually relatively small. The tools are pretty much identical. So if I was working in Mocha Pro, I'd be using exactly the same tools that I'm using in Mocha for After Effects. The difference really comes down to these modules that you have down here. In Mocha for After Effects we've got one that says Clip, one called Track, one called Adjust Track, whereas on Mocha Pro I've got a whole bunch of other modules, things like Lens, Insert, Remove and Stabilize. And these are what you pay for inserting bits and pieces, dealing with lens distortion, removing items, stabilizing the whole thing. And it's not just stabilizing, it's also using intelligent data to be able to add bits in from previous parts of your shot so that you can fill your shot up really well. So Mocha Pro has got a whole bunch of options that Mocha for After Effects doesn't have. However, when it comes to rotoscoping and it comes to tracking, Mocha is absolutely the tool to use. A really good planar tracker, which means it doesn't just track a point, it tracks a complete plane, but we'll come to that a bit later on. Okay, before we import the footage, I just want to show you a preference which I think is really important in Mocha. So if you open up your file menu, you'll find towards the bottom is the preferences, and then on the output settings, the very first tab, you have something in the middle bottom that says cache original clip. And this is something that I would advise that you check. It usually comes unchecked. I would advise you check so that when the original clip comes in, it's automatically cached into memory, which means that the item is going to play back very smoothly and you're not going to have any real problems. Now there's quite a lot of other items here which I'm not going to go through, except just to show that this is where your software updates are found. In many other applications they're usually found under the help menu, but for Mocha it's found under the preferences. You've got software update, and you can check now and see if you need to have a software update. I'm not going to do that because I know I'm up to date at the moment. I'm going to click OK, and that's minimized it, and so I'm going to take it back full screen. Okay, so how do we bring the item in? Well, you can either go File, New Project, or we can simply click on the New Project item here, and we get an import dialog box, and we go to Choose to select the clip, which is on my desktop. Double click to bring it in and wait a few moments while it analyzes the clip. Okay, so it says the name of the clip was 2, which is correct. Where am I going to keep the results that I come up with? It's going to keep them in the same place as the original clip, which is on my desktop. The frame range, we can change it to timecode a bit later on, but at the moment we've got frame range. It's telling me it's 94 frames. Now I know this clip is a 25 frames per second, so it's PAL HDV clip, so it's got it absolutely correct. However, I happen to know it's interlaced, so I'm going to go from separate fields to upper field first. So we've got that all correct. Now it's important that however I set this up here is exactly the same as the footage in After Effects. You don't actually keep the footage and use the footage from Mocha, you just use the tracking data that you create and the shape data that you create, and you copy that and you move that across to After Effects. So if you've got the frame rate wrong, or you've got the pixel aspect ratio wrong, all the tracking data and all the shape data that you create in Mocha won't match the actual footage that you've got back in After Effects. So if you're unsure, you can go to After Effects and you can select the footage and you can go up and check what it is up here. So it's 25 frames per second, it's HDV. So you need to know what your footage is, and then you need to make sure it's right. Under the Advanced tab, again you have the option to cache the clip if you haven't remembered to do that in your preferences, and you can change from frame numbers to timecode if you want. I'm not going to go into all the other bits and pieces. I'm just simply going to click OK. It's going to load the footage in. Well, we've already done this once before, so it says, do you want to overwrite? Yes, I do. It's going to load the footage in. If you look up here, it's going to cache it into memory. And once it's cached in there, we're going to find that it plays back smoothly. Okay, here are your play buttons. So we can simply click the play button here, and it will play forward, and then it will ping pong backwards and forwards. So if I just click play for a moment. Now, this man is going to be difficult to rotoscope in one particular place. It's not his shoulders or his arms, they move as one plane. It's not his ear, because that's not really changing shape, that's just moving. Or even his hair, which is, okay, quite difficult to separate, but not impossible. When I play it again one more time, I want you to look at this part of his face, and you'll see that there's quite a lot of change as he speaks around his cheek area here. And this is the area that's going to cause most problems, and the area that we really need to concentrate most on. So I'm just going to push play again. So you can see that this is the area that's going to need the most work. However, before we get into the tracking, I want to show you how to use the drawing tools in Mocha so that we can draw around, say, this ornate candle over here and create a path or a mask or a shape, if you like, around the whole thing, and then one cutout, so I can show you how that works in After Effects. And in the next tutorial, we'll actually start to do the tracking. Okay, so the tools that you need to know to zoom in and out is to use the Z or the Z key, as we say in the UK. So you hit the Z key or the Z key, and as you hold it down, you get this two-way arrow which simply says hold your mouse button and push in to zoom in, and hold your mouse button and pull out to zoom out. And if you zoom right into something and you want to go back to full screen, hold the Z button and double click, and it takes it back to full screen. Now, to pan around your shot, in After Effects it's the space bar, but in Mocha it is the letter next to Z or the X key. If you hold the X key down, you can actually pan around and you get the hand. So we're going to be using the Z key to zoom in, and then we're going to be using the X key to move around. Now we're going to be drawing a shape around this item, and then we're going to be exporting that shape to After Effects, and we have got some tools for drawing at the top. Now we have one called an X-spline, which isn't ideal for ornate shapes like this. It's great for selecting tracking areas, but it's not really going to work incredibly well on this item. But let me just demonstrate it. You take the X-spline tool and start to click. You don't have a chance to click and drag. You just click, click, click. If I go around here and click. Now if I just finish off just to show you, it's given me points, but these points are quite hard to control. I can pull them and straighten them, but there's no way, for instance, I'm going to be able to get around the loop of this candle. So the X-spline is a brilliant tool for creating rough shapes and does a great job for many things, but for this sort of work it's not going to work for us. It's created a layer, so we can select the layer and right click on it and delete the layer. What we're going to have to use again is the Bezier tool, very similar to how we use that tool in After Effects. Now occasionally Mocha can be a little bit awkward about how you use the handles, so before you start changing and moving handles, I advise you to draw a few points and then go back and change them. So I'm going to start down here and I'm going to work around, say, to the top here, and then I'm going to go back and start changing handles. So if you think it doesn't look too brilliant, you'll understand why, because occasionally if you start changing the handles too quickly, Mocha gets a bit grumpy and says it doesn't play and the handles don't break in quite the right way. But as in After Effects, once you've selected the Bezier tool, the Create Bezier Layer tool, it's click and drag. So I'm going to click and drag to go up, I'm going to click and drag to go sideways, and at the end here I'm going to click and drag, I'm going to click and drag here, and I'm going to click and drag here. And okay, so it looks a bit odd at the moment. What I can do to break these handles is not use the Alt key as you would in After Effects, but use the Control or the Command key. So holding the Control key down, you go until you get this convert or break Bezier points, and then you can click and drag and break the points. And because I've waited to do this, they behave a little bit better. Just occasionally they're a bit awkward. As you can see, this one's going to be a bit awkward. And you just have to work with them. To actually move the points itself, it's a simple case of not having any keys down and just getting the four-way arrow, and then you can physically move those points down, then go back to the Control key or the Command key to actually get that little arrow. And then of course if you want to, you can hold the Z key or the Z key and the X key to zoom in and pan around, move these points, get them to about the right place. Now obviously the more you move in here, the greater artifacting that you're going to be able to see, and obviously that's an issue that you're going to have to work with. I'm getting a few problems. I suspect this is probably as much to do with my using my recording software as anything else. Anyway, now that I've moved those ones, I just simply need to carry on clicking to add additional points, and again I can go back and move these points around so that they're about in the right place. I suspect you'll have far less problems than me with this. This is just because of the multiple programs I've got running to record the screen. But just occasionally Mocha can be a little bit awkward with these points. Bear with it, work with them, and you'll be able to get there in due course. If you've had a bit of a problem like with difficult breaking this point here, just go on to your next point, a couple of points after that, and then usually it's a bit easier to actually get to grips with those points. Okay, I'm going to draw around this and come back to you once I've drawn a bit further. Okay, so I've drawn around that very quickly. Unfortunately the points were being a little bit awkward today, but I think that's just my screen recording software. But as you can see, I've actually drawn into the man, and that's deliberate because this man is going to be completely masked out, and so therefore this part just overlapping ensures that there's no gap. Because if I'd have masked right to the edge of him, then there's a possibility that when I came around and did him, I could have a gap between the two. So if you've got a mask like this, actually draw it into the item that's definitely going to show, and then you're not going to have any gaps between the two, which is what I've done here. Okay, so I've drawn around this actual item and it's created a layer. I need to name it, so double click the layer, highlight it and name that one candle. Hit return. I'm not going to track this item. It's not moving, it's staying still. This is the tracking item. It says track this layer. We're not going to track it, so just turn it off. And in actual fact, rather than calling it just a candle, quite often it's better to call it, particularly if you have tracks on the same thing, a matte. So that's now called the candle matte layer, and if I was tracking the candle, I would have called it the candle track layer. Okay, and so that layer is actually now created and ready to go. Now what we want to do is create a hole, say, in this point here. So again, I'm going to zoom in and hold the X key to move across. Now again, you can't really see very well. When you start zooming in like this, you begin to realize just how much artifacting there is on something like HDV. It's really difficult to see what's what. So I'm just going to cut a hole out here anyway, just to demonstrate how we do it. Again, we're going to choose the Bezier tool. As soon as we've chosen the Bezier tool, as soon as I click, a new layer is going to be created over here. So I'm just going to click and drag here, click and drag here, click and drag here, click and drag here, and click again at the beginning, the first point, and then I can hold the control key just to sort of play around with these handles, which I can see are going to be a little bit awkward even as we're doing this because of the software I am running on this computer, but we'll move them into place. If you want to move multiple points, by the way, you can select multiple points and move them together, or you could select all of the points and move the whole mask. This is just a rough idea to show you how it's done. Now I've created this mask. It's called layer 3 at the moment, and it's selected. We can unselect it or select it. Now it's selected, one of the things that I might want to do is actually add a feather around it, and that's done under this layer just below, which is called edge properties, and you can actually do an edge width. Now bear in mind we are very highly zoomed in, so you do not want a big edge width, but I might want, say, 1 pixel, and when I go over it to change it, I get this slightly different looking icon, which is telling me that to change it I need to actually do a circular motion with my mouse. I don't move left and right as I would say in After Effects. I start to go round in circles. As you can see, as I start to go round in circles one way or the other, the values change. So that's what that little icon actually means. Rotate, don't drag side to side. But actually I'm just going to click in there and type 1 pixel. And I want it to affect the whole shape all the way through. Now I'm right at the beginning, so if I add a feather at this point, it will change it for all the way through, unless of course I change it again at a later point. That's what this point over here, the auto keyframe key, is doing. It's saying every time you make a change I'll create a new keyframe. And so if I click set, it means it's set it, and if I move all the way through it's going to stay at 1 pixel, but if I change it at any point, so I change it to 2 pixels at this point and click set again, now you'll see that we go from 1 pixel and it grows to 2 and stays at 2 all the way through. Okay, so that's how you can change it if you need to. Again, we don't need to track this layer. We've created the shapes. That's actually going to grow. If I wanted to add a feather to this main shape of the candle matte, I can click the candle matte, and again I can click, say, 1 pixel and click set. That's going to be set all the way through. And if you want to adjust these points, as I've shown in the previous tutorial, you can actually use these inner points or external points, and you can click on this pointer here and I can actually change the size of the feather by moving this point, which is a marvellous little option that you have. Okay, so I'm just going to rename this second layer, this matte layer, and I'm going to call it my hole, just so that we know what it's called, and hit return to enter. Now I need to get these over to After Effects. So I can select either one of these two mattes and then go down to this track layer here, and it says export tracking data or export shape data. Now we are dealing simply with shapes at the moment, so I'm going to click export shape data, click on that, and the only option you have is Mocha shape data for After Effects. And we actually want to do not just the selected layer but all visible layers. So click on all visible layers, and rather than saving them, add them to the clipboard. In other words, we're just copying them at the moment, and then we go across to After Effects, select our layer, make sure that we're at the right point, so it is actually this layer, not the top one. Let's rename these. Actually, we call this bottom one, hit return and call that shapes, and this top layer I'm going to call masks. just so that we know what's what. If we look at this top layer, that's the mask, so that's right. So select the shapes layer, the bottom layer, and go to edit paste or control or command V. And there it is, it's actually brought in. However, I'm just going to zoom in so you can see there's a slight problem of the spacebar to pan with After Effects. Notice the hole isn't showing. So if we select the layer and go to our effects controls, you'll see that we've actually got two effects added in, the candle matte and the hole. They've been brought across. The top one is in multiply, the second one is in add. But actually what we want to do is take the hole, the second one, make sure they're not both selected, by the way, so click away to make sure they're not selected, and just select the one that you need to work on and change its blend mode from add to subtract. And there's your hole with a nice soft edge. Okay, so I'm going to go back to fit. So that's how we can draw. I'm sorry the drawing didn't work perfectly, you just have to be a little bit careful. Sometimes if you're running something else, those Bezier points can be a little bit awkward in Mocha, but you shouldn't have the same problems I did. So that's how you can draw a shape. You can bring the shape across and add it into After Effects. But as you can see, these are effects, whereas on the top layer there are no effects, but there are plenty of masks. Masks will render faster than effects. If you have to use effects and you've got multiple effects to cut out all these little holes, cut out all these little holes, you'll find that your machine will be a lot slower than if you were to do it all with masks and do the tracking of the important bits, in this case the man himself, in Mocha, and use that shape data in After Effects, and not try and build lots and lots of different shapes in Mocha that you bring across and slow down your machine. I hope you found this first part useful. In the next one we'll actually begin to look at how we're going to do the roto. My name's Andrew Davis and thank you for watching.